Starving monkey approaches a researcher, and what it does next will break your heart. The moment the starving monkey locked eyes with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, she knew this wasn't just another scientific observation. This was a moment that would shatter every boundary between human and animal she'd ever believed existed. In the suffocating heat of the Amazon rainforest, where survival was measured in heartbeats and desperate choices, a connection was about to unfold that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about intelligence, survival, and the language of desperation. At 38, Elena was already a renowned primatologist with over 15 years of field research experience. She'd studied monkey communities across South America, published groundbreaking papers on social behavior, and was respected within academic circles for her meticulous approach. Her current research focused on understanding communication patterns and social dynamics among capuchin monkey troops in the dense Brazilian rainforest. The expedition had been grueling. For weeks, she and her small research team had been tracking a specific troop, documenting their interactions, collecting data, and battling the unforgiving tropical environment. Humidity clung to their skin like a second layer, insects buzzed relentlessly, and the constant threat of tropical diseases kept them on edge. As the hours passed, Elena's initial scientific curiosity transformed into something more profound. Miguel, the name she'd given the injured monkey, didn't just sit passively. He began to communicate in ways that defied everything Elena understood about animal behavior. When she moved slightly, he would tilt his head. When she spoke softly, he would respond with a series of precise, calculated chirps that seemed more like a conversation than random animal sounds. The protein bar remained untouched, a silent testament to the fact that Miguel wanted something far more complex than mere sustenance. "What are you trying to tell me?" Elena whispered, her professional detachment crumbling with each passing moment. As the afternoon light filtered through the dense rainforest canopy, Miguel began to reveal his story, not through words but through a series of gestures that seemed almost choreographed. He would point, then look at her, then point again, directing her attention to something beyond the immediate clearing. And at first, Elena thought it was nothing more than random behavior. But primatologists don't survive in the field by ignoring subtle communications. Something about Miguel's behavior was deliberate, intentional. It was Marco, her research assistant, who would later piece together the first part of the puzzle. "There's been unusual activity in this region," Marco said that evening at their base camp, studying some satellite imagery. "Illegal logging operations have been pushing deeper into the rainforest. The monkey troops have been experiencing significant disruption." Elena's mind raced. Miguel wasn't just a starving monkey. He was a survivor, a messenger. The next morning, she followed Miguel's precise, calculated movements. He limped, but with purpose. Each step seemed designed to catch her attention, to lead her somewhere specific. Through dense undergrowth, across treacherous terrain, the monkey guided her with an intelligence that bordered on the miraculous. What Elena would discover would change everything. Not just about her research, but about the fundamental way humans understood animal intelligence and communication. By midday, they reached a hidden clearing, and there Elena found something that would challenge every scientific assumption she'd ever made. A small group of young capuchin monkeys huddled together, injured, starving, separated from their troop. Miguel hadn't just been seeking help for himself, he had been seeking help for his entire family. The story of Miguel was about to become more than just a scientific discovery. It was about to become a testament to survival, to communication beyond language, and to the extraordinary bonds that exist in the natural world. The young capuchins were in dire condition. Some had visible wounds, deep gashes that suggested violent encounters, likely with logging equipment or predators displaced by human encroachment. Others were so severely malnourished that they could barely move. Miguel positioned himself protectively near the group, his injured leg seemingly forgotten in his determination to keep them safe. Elena realized with growing astonishment that this wasn't just a random gathering of orphaned monkeys. This was a carefully orchestrated rescue mission. "How did you manage this?" she whispered, her professional skepticism battling with a growing sense of wonder. Marco arrived shortly after, his medical kit already open. As a trained wildlife veterinarian, he understood the critical nature of their discovery. "These wounds," he murmured, examining the most severely injured monkey, a young female with a deep cut along her side. "They're consistent with machinery damage. Logging equipment, most likely." Elena's mind raced. Her research had always been about observation, about maintaining scientific distance. But this demanded intervention. "We need to help them," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. The next 48 hours became a blur of emergency veterinary care, careful monitoring, and a growing realization that Miguel was far more than just another research subject. He watched every move, seemingly understanding each medical intervention, occasionally chirping instructions that Marco and Elena found themselves instinctively following. "It's like he knows exactly what needs to be done," Marco said one night, as they sat exhausted near their makeshift medical station. The young Capuchins were stabilized, receiving nutrition and treatment, with Miguel keeping a vigilant watch. Elena had documented countless monkey behaviors in her career, but nothing prepared her for Miguel's apparent comprehension. When a particularly weak monkey needed special attention, Miguel would tap Elena's hand, then point precisely to the area that needed treatment. "This is beyond learned behavior," she told Marco. "This is deliberate communication, intentional problem solving." Their base camp transformed into a rescue center. Emergency supplies were redirected. Research protocols were temporarily abandoned. Miguel became their guide, their translator, their connection to the small, traumatized group of Capuchins. But the biggest revelations were yet to come. A week into their rescue mission, Elena discovered something that would change the trajectory of her entire career. Hidden among the young monkey's wounds and scars was evidence of something far more sinister than random forest dangers. Precise cut marks, numbered tags, traces of sedation. These monkeys weren't just victims of logging. They had been part of something else entirely. Elena looked at Miguel, who met her gaze with an intensity that seemed to say, "Now you understand." The real story was just beginning. The evidence pointed to something Elena had heard whispers about but never encountered directly. Illegal wildlife trafficking. The numbered tags, the surgical precision of some wounds. These weren't accidents. These young Capuchins had escaped from a smuggling operation. "We need to document everything," Elena said, her hands trembling as she photographed the evidence. "Every mark, every tag, every scar." But Miguel had more to show them. 2 days later, when the rescued monkeys were stable enough to be left in Marco's care, Miguel led Elena deeper into the forest. His limp was improving with regular meals and care, but there was an urgency to his movements that made Elena's heart race. After 3 hours of careful navigation through dense undergrowth, they reached what appeared to be an abandoned camp. Rusty cages lay scattered among fallen leaves. Medical equipment, syringes, and torn logbooks provided a grim testament to the operation that had once existed here. "This is where they held you," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Miguel's response was immediate. He began gathering scattered papers, bringing them to Elena one by one, as if he understood their importance as evidence. Each document revealed more details about the trafficking operation: dates, locations, buyer information. But it was what they found in one of the larger cages that broke Elena's heart completely. A small wooden box, lined with soft leaves, contained tiny bones. Not all the captured monkeys had survived their ordeal. Miguel sat beside the cage, making soft, mournful sounds that needed no translation. Elena understood now. Miguel hadn't just escaped. He had orchestrated a rescue, coming back for the others, leading them to safety, and then seeking out human help with deliberate purpose. His intelligence wasn't just remarkable, it was revolutionary. That evening, as Elena compiled her findings, she made a decision that would alter not just her career, but the very nature of her research. "We're not just documenting communication patterns anymore," she told Marco. "We're witnessing something that could change how we understand primate intelligence entirely." But their discovery had not gone unnoticed. The trafficking operation might have been abandoned, but its operators were still active in the region, and they wouldn't take kindly to their operation being exposed. The first warning came in the form of fresh tire tracks near their camp. Then equipment began to go missing. Finally, one morning, they found their satellite communication equipment completely destroyed. Someone was watching them, and Miguel seemed to know it. That night, the jungle's symphony took on a sinister tone. The usual chirping of crickets seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Miguel paced near their camp, his movements sharp and agitated. Unlike his usual careful observation, he kept darting between Elena's tent and the perimeter of their camp, his eyes reflecting the dim light of their solar lanterns. Elena watched him closely, noting how he would freeze occasionally, head tilted, listening intently. Years of research had taught her to read primate body language, and everything about Miguel's behavior screamed danger. Earlier that day, he had demonstrated an almost uncanny awareness of their surroundings. When a supply helicopter had passed overhead, unusual for their remote location, Miguel had immediately gathered the recovering monkeys and led them under dense canopy cover. He then returned to camp, systematically checking their equipment, touching each piece as if taking inventory. "Something's wrong," Elena whispered to Marco, who was checking on their rescued monkeys. "Miguel's behavior. It's different from his usual alertness." Marco nodded, his face grim in the lantern light. "I've been watching too. The way he's monitoring the perimeter, it's almost like he's expecting something." As if confirming their suspicions, a twig snapped in the darkness. Then another. The sounds were too deliberate, too rhythmic to be natural forest movement. Miguel suddenly went still, a behavior Elena had never seen from him before. His eyes fixed on a point in the darkness beyond their camp. The rescued monkeys in their makeshift medical enclosure, who had been chattering softly, fell silent all at once. Miguel turned to Elena, and in that moment, she saw something in his eyes that sent chills down her spine. Not just intelligence, but strategic thinking. He moved to the medical supplies, deliberately touching specific items: the emergency kit, the water purifier, the portable solar charger. Then he looked at Elena's research pack, the one containing all their documentation. "He's telling us what to take," Marco breathed, understanding dawning on his face. Elena's hands trembled as she began carefully packing the indicated items. Years of scientific training hadn't prepared her for this, the moment when research became a matter of life and death, guided by the very subject she was studying. The footsteps grew closer. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, sweeping the forest floor. Miguel's response was immediate and astounding. He quickly moved to the lanterns, pulling at them insistently until Marco understood and turned them off. In the sudden darkness, Elena could hear multiple voices speaking rapid Portuguese, discussing merchandise and loose ends. That's when Miguel did something that would challenge every scientific paper ever written about primate behavior. He grabbed Elena's hand, something he'd never done before, and tugged her toward a specific path in the dense undergrowth. His grip was gentle but insistent, his purpose clear. This was their escape route, and they needed to move now. "Marco!" Elena whispered urgently. "We need to follow him." They had barely disappeared into the forest when voices broke the silence of their abandoned camp. Miguel's chosen path seemed random at first, but as they moved through the darkness, Elena began to understand his strategy. He was leading them through areas with dense overhead canopy, making them invisible from above. The path, while difficult for humans, offered multiple hiding spots and alternate routes. Every few minutes, Miguel would stop, positioning himself so his lighter-colored chest fur wasn't visible. The other rescued monkeys, despite their injuries, followed with remarkable silence, understanding the gravity of the situation. When flashlight beams would sweep nearby, Miguel would guide everyone into natural hollows or behind large tree trunks. One particularly tense moment occurred when they reached a small ravine. The traffickers' voices were getting closer, and their flashlight beams were becoming more focused. Miguel surveyed the situation, his eyes darting between the approaching lights and the steep sides of the ravine. Then, remarkably, he began gathering fallen vines and branches. Elena watched in amazement as he demonstrated not just tool use, something already documented in capuchin monkeys, but actual engineering. He wove the vines through the branches, creating a crude but effective rope-like structure. Then he secured one end to a sturdy tree and let the makeshift rope dangle down the ravine side. "He wants us to climb down," Marco whispered, his scientific skepticism battling with the evidence before his eyes. "But what about the injured monkeys?" Before they could figure out a solution, Miguel had already organized his troop. The stronger monkeys positioned themselves in a living chain down the ravine side, creating secure points for their injured companions to rest during the descent. It was cooperation at a level that defied everything Elena knew about primate behavior. The sound of a branch breaking nearby spurred them into action. Elena and Marco quickly descended, using Miguel's vine branch construct, while above them, the monkey troop executed their evacuation with military precision. Miguel himself stayed at the top, watching the approaching lights, only descending when everyone else was safely down. But Miguel's strategic thinking didn't stop there. Once at the bottom of the ravine, he led them to a small stream and indicated they should walk in the water. He's hiding our scent, Elena realized. He understands tracking. Throughout the night, Miguel demonstrated increasingly sophisticated problem-solving abilities. When they needed to rest, he chose a hollow tree with multiple escape routes. When they needed to cross a clearing bathed in moonlight, he organized the troop to cross in small groups, minimizing exposure. One of the most remarkable moments came when they heard the distant sound of vehicles. Miguel immediately led them to a dense thicket of thorny vines. Elena watched in astonishment as he carefully bent branches to create a hidden passage, deliberately avoiding the thorns. Once everyone was safely concealed, he meticulously rearranged the branches to hide their entrance. The vehicles passed within 20 feet of their hiding spot. Through gaps in the foliage, Elena could see armed men with professional tracking equipment. This wasn't just a local operation. This was organized wildlife trafficking on an international scale. As they waited in tense silence, Elena observed something extraordinary. Miguel moved among his injured companions, touching them gently, offering what could only be described as comfort. When one young monkey started to whimper, Miguel immediately placed his hand over its mouth, understanding the need for absolute silence. "Look at this," Marco breathed, pointing to the group's organization. The injured monkeys were in the center, protected on all sides. The stronger ones had positioned themselves near potential escape routes, and Miguel moved between them all, seemingly checking their status and adjusting their positions for optimal safety. After what felt like hours, the vehicles moved on. But Miguel waited, displaying an understanding of timing that seemed almost human. Only when the forest's natural sounds had returned did he indicate it was safe to move. The next demonstration of his intelligence came at dawn. Instead of immediately leading them towards safety, Miguel took them to a series of fruit trees. He carefully selected specific fruits, offering different types to different injured monkeys. Elena realized he was choosing based on their conditions. Softer fruits for those with mouth injuries, more nutritious ones for the severely malnourished. "He's not just leading us," Elena whispered to Marco. "He's providing medical care. He remembers how we treated them, and he's applying that knowledge." But Miguel's most astounding display of intelligence came when they reached a fork in their path. He picked up a stick and, to Elena's utter amazement, began drawing in the soft earth. The marks were crude but unmistakable. A simple map showing two paths, one leading to higher ground, the other following the river. "This is impossible," Marco muttered. "This level of abstract thinking, it's beyond anything ever documented in non-human primates." Miguel pointed insistently at the river path, then made a gesture they'd come to recognize, his indication of human presence. He was telling them there was a research station in that direction. As they followed the river path, Miguel's displays of intelligence became increasingly remarkable. He'd developed a sophisticated system of communication with Elena and Marco, using a combination of gestures, sounds, and deliberate actions that went far beyond typical primate behavior. When they needed to rest, he would make a specific chirping sound, 3 short calls followed by a longer one. When he sensed danger, he'd developed a different signal, a soft, low sound, followed by a gesture indicating which direction the threat was coming from. The other monkeys had learned these signals too, creating an intricate communication network that kept the entire group safe. One afternoon, they encountered a particularly challenging obstacle, a section of river too deep to wade through, with steep cliffs on either side. Miguel disappeared for nearly an hour, concerning Elena, but returned with an astounding solution. He led them to a spot where several fallen trees created a natural bridge across the water. But what truly amazed them was watching him test different branches for stability before allowing anyone to cross, methodically checking each one's strength. "This isn't just problem solving," Elena told Marco as they watched Miguel organize the crossing. "This is risk assessment. He's not only finding solutions, he's evaluating their safety. The injured monkeys crossed first, with stronger ones positioned at regular intervals to offer support. Miguel supervised every crossing, adjusting positions and offering assistance where needed. When one young monkey hesitated, showing fear, Miguel demonstrated the crossing himself first, then returned to accompany the frightened youngster. During their journey, Elena observed Miguel teaching the younger monkeys survival skills. He showed them which plants to avoid, which insects were safe to eat, and how to find clean water. It was structured learning, something that had never been documented in wild capuchin monkeys. One particularly touching moment occurred when they found another injured animal, a young bird that had fallen from its nest. Instead of ignoring it or seeing it as potential food, Miguel gently picked it up. Using skills he'd learned from watching Elena treat his injured companions, he created a small nest from soft leaves and placed it in a secure location where the parent birds could find it. "He's not just learning," Elena whispered to Marco. "He's developing empathy beyond his own species." Their nights were filled with equally remarkable demonstrations of Miguel's intelligence. He'd established a complex sleeping arrangement for the group, injured monkeys in the most protected positions, stronger ones taking turns keeping watch. He seemed to understand the concept of shifts, rotating the guards throughout the night to ensure everyone got rest. But perhaps the most extraordinary display came when they nearly walked into a patrol of traffickers. Miguel had sensed them before anyone else and quickly organized a diversion. He coordinated with several stronger monkeys to create noise in one direction while leading the main group to safety in another, a classic military-style misdirection tactic. "This is beyond anything we've ever seen," Marco said that evening, as they watched Miguel draw another crude map in the dirt, showing their progress and the distance remaining to the research station. "He's not just intelligent, he's teaching, planning, strategizing. He understands abstract concepts like mapping and time." Elena nodded, remembering how this had all started with a starving monkey approaching her in the forest. "He chose us," she realized. "He didn't just find random humans for help. He observed us, understood we were researchers, and made a calculated decision to trust us." The proof of this came the next morning. As they approached the research station, Miguel led them to a vantage point and pointed to the buildings below. Then remarkably, he mimicked the act of writing in a notebook, something he'd seen Elena do countless times. He was confirming this was their destination by associating it with scientific work. Their arrival at the research station created an immediate sensation. As Elena and Marco emerged from the forest with their extraordinary group, the resident scientists initially thought they were hallucinating. A procession of injured capuchin monkeys, led by a remarkably composed male, following two bedraggled researchers. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen. But Miguel wasn't finished surprising them. As the station's medical team began treating the injured monkeys, he demonstrated an understanding of modern medicine that left everyone astounded. He would guide the veterinarians to specific injuries, indicate the severity of pain through a series of gestures they came to understand, and even seemed to grasp the concept of medication schedules. "Watch this," Elena told Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's lead researcher, one morning. Miguel had approached the medical supply cabinet at exactly 8 a.m., the same time they had been giving antibiotics to one of the injured young females. He pointed to the cabinet, then to the monkey, then held up his hand with fingers spread, mimicking their gesture for timing. "He's tracking their treatment schedules," Dr. Chen whispered in awe. "This is unprecedented." But it was Miguel's behavior during the documentation of evidence that truly demonstrated the depth of his understanding. When federal authorities arrived to investigate the trafficking operation, he seemed to grasp the importance of their work. He would point out specific tags and markings on the rescued monkeys, wait patiently during photographing sessions, and even led a team back to the abandoned trafficking camp, carefully marking the trail so others could follow. "It's as if he understands the concept of justice," Elena noted in her journal. "He's not just helping us gather evidence. He's actively participating in the investigation." The most remarkable demonstration of his intelligence came during a video conference with international primatologists. As Elena presented their findings to a skeptical academic audience, Miguel sat quietly beside her computer. When one professor expressed doubt about the level of intelligence being claimed, Miguel approached the screen and began a series of deliberate demonstrations. Tool use, mathematical understanding, grouping objects in specific numbers, and even basic pattern recognition using some of the station's research materials. Well, the professor said after a long silence, I believe we're witnessing the beginning of a paradigm shift in our understanding of primate cognition. Over the next few months, as the trafficking case built and the injured monkeys recovered, Miguel's role evolved. He became a bridge between the human and monkey worlds, helping researchers understand subtle aspects of capuchin behavior they'd never noticed before. He showed them how his species communicated emotions, demonstrated their problem-solving methods, and revealed complex social structures that had gone unobserved by humans. But it was his continuing relationship with Elena that proved most extraordinary. 6 months after their initial encounter, Elena was working at her outdoor desk when Miguel approached with something clutched carefully in his hand. It was a piece of the protein bar wrapper, the very first food she had offered him. He had kept it all this time, seemingly understanding its significance as the beginning of their journey together. That moment became symbolic of the larger impact of their story. The discovery of such advanced intelligence in capuchin monkeys led to revolutionary changes in wildlife protection laws. The research station, now dedicated to studying primate cognition, became a global center for animal intelligence research. Miguel's troop, fully recovered and free, made their home in the protected forest around the station. They became the most studied capuchin community in the world, with Miguel continuing to reveal new aspects of primate intelligence. He would regularly visit the station, sometimes bringing injured animals for treatment, other times simply observing the researchers' work with those same knowing eyes that had first connected with Elena in her moment of crisis. The most profound scientific discoveries, Elena would later write in her groundbreaking book, often come disguised as desperation. A starving monkey approached me that day in the Amazon, but what he really brought was a key to understanding the vast, untapped depths of animal consciousness. Today, the protein bar wrapper sits in a special display at the research station, next to Miguel's first crude dirt maps and photographs documenting his extraordinary journey. But more importantly, his legacy lives on in the way humans now understand and protect his species. And Miguel? He continues to surprise them. Each visit brings new insights, new demonstrations of intelligence that challenge their understanding. He's become more than a research subject or even a survivor. He's become a teacher, showing humans that in the vast tapestry of life on Earth, we've only begun to understand the true depth of animal consciousness, communication, and compassion. As Elena often tells her students now, while they watch Miguel teaching young monkeys how to use the station's enrichment tools, sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries aren't the ones we seek, but the ones that find us, when we're ready to see beyond our assumptions and open our hearts to the extraordinary possibilities that exist in the natural world.